Okay, now I can share my screen. You should see my screen now.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so these are some of the diagrams that I received.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have CSSP here.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you said is that it's actually accepting its input from the external collaborators.
Correct.
It is not reflected here, right?
It is not reflected here. It is reflected on the original diagram that I gave you, the first one. In that PDF, it'll show coming in from programmatic partners. So CSSP is off to the left side of that diagram. It comes into programmatic partners, and then from there it's processed on. But yes, this is from external, where we get files coming in.
Okay, so we get the, how do you call this file? CSX?
SCX.
SCX. Let me note it down one time. SCX. SCX. And what is the how do you define the responsibility of CSSP?
It's to process those files. So it's a UI and underlying services. It processes the SCX files, turns them into orders in XGL, and then from there activates those orders.
To XGL or to TIM or to both?
It gets the SCX file and transfers it to TIM. TIM is the one that actually, through its file queue monitor, actually takes and puts it into XGL. But then there's an output from there that gets picked back up after the confirmation that it's in XGL, that then the order gets activated by API.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And why is it called a firewall? Because it's also doing some kind of edge validation?
Yeah, it does a validation on the files. For instance, it looks at the rates, tries to understand from the SCX file, does this particular request actually meet the rate? Do we take these particular items out because they won't meet the rate and they won't bump something on the schedule? And so it can do a modification of those files and validation of the files.
Got it. And I will guess it is homegrown, going by the Lenjet, probably .NET, developed by your team.
It was developed by another team, the same team that originally developed DIO.
Mm-hmm.
We've taken it over. We've only taken it over since Roadrunner was started. When we looked at the application, there was no active development that we could see on it since 2018. We took and upgraded it, Angular on it, upgraded .NET on it. It was one of the few applications that was still running in Azure, because that's where it was originally set up. We took and rebuilt it, and the underlying services are still sitting on internal servers, but the whole UI and everything in the background was running inside of Azure. We've moved that over to AWS. We still have a little bit of work to do the SSO on it, but we've moved it over to AWS, and the plan is to move the whole rest of the backend over to AWS so that we're consolidated on one platform.
Oh, this was one of my questions, because it looks indeed like a mix of Azure on-prem and AWS, and I was wondering whether it's going to be more maintainable in one area. So yeah,
exactly. That was our exact plan. We want to get everything into AWS, because from a data perspective, a data lake perspective, everything is in AWS.
Yeah. Which AWS service, by the way, is your candidate or already decided runtime? Like it can be, Kubernetes or Lambda or EC2 or
we're in Lambda. We're in Lambda with the front end in Angular, essentially running through CloudFront to uniform the URLs, as well as having S3 bucket just to run the website underneath for Angular.
Got it. But by the way, okay, cool. And e-revisions also homegrown, I would get.
Essentially, e-revisions is homegrown. My team doesn't really touch e-revisions. This was something really done and managed by operations. The only thing that we really do is work with CSSP from my team and actually send and activate the orders. But this is typically described as the e-revision process.
So it is being developed, it's not third-party product, rather being developed by operations.
Yeah, this is the whole e-revisions process is handled by operations. We don't touch that. That's just part of the things in the configuration and things that were done against Novar and done against XGL. The only part that we touch is the initial activation of the order.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, I mean, in a classic setup, usually ops are usually concerned with maintaining and hosting and in ops work. And here
Right.
it seems like they're doing a lot of architecture and development work.
This is a historical issue. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came on, this is part of the transition of the organization and why we have some of these growing pains issues and trying to understand this. When I came on board in 2019, there was no internal development. They were only using contractors, only using vendors. When the contract organization Comet left, they brought me in to start up internal development. But that was happening from one technology team that was operations as well as new product development. So from technology, it was one organization. And about end of 2020 into 2021, the new product development as part of technology moved and went to combine with classic product development, our product owners. And along with that, we added in a PMO organization because there was no PMO organization. So that's that whole group, technology, new development, the product owners and product management, as well as a new PMO organization stood up under one organization.
Can you repeat this? Stood up on what?
In one organization. So we split off. So essentially now you had a separate organization. Product management was always separate, but essentially now we had a separate technology organization that actually worked on new development and a separate PMO organization. So what traditionally happened in the past was that if something new needed to be developed, it was developed under this operations organization. And so from an architectural standpoint, everything that was originally decided for Roadrunner and those decisions came about under the operations organization and did not happen under the new technology organization. So the major pre-planning, figuring out architecture and all of that did not happen from new development. It happened under the old technology organization operations.
Got it. And is this something that is considered to be changed in the future, or?
It is supposed to be changed, and typically there's collaboration that happens because there's a large institutional knowledge gap because we've got people who have been sitting on that operations team for years. You've got Monty, who's been there for years, who basically built that organization, and you have people underneath him who have worked there to set up the whole architecture and the direction that everything should go. What we've had continuously in the project is back and forth about, hey, this is what we think the architecture would be. Us in new development come around and say, okay, that's what you want us to build. That's what you're saying are the requirements, and you vetted all of the requirements. And we find out later on down the line in the project that, oh, you didn't actually vet all of the requirements. You didn't do things in an agile way. You thought you had all of the requirements, but now we have our user base and people in the field coming to us and telling us, well, no, we need this, and we're doing this in the current application, and this is not addressed, and we don't like this. And so that's some of the issues that we've had along the way in the Roadrunner project. We didn't have, from my perspective, I came in and was said, hey, write out a whole way that we're going to do DevOps, and we're going to do it from a new perspective in Agile. but the organization never truly moved in that direction. They were still very much doing things waterfall. So they thought they had all of the requirements when we started Roadrunner. And what we found out as we went along, no, all of the stakeholders weren't solicited and brought in to understand that we got full requirements. And two, as we got along, this caused our dates to change because you're already going to have unknowns anyway. But the mere fact that we did not have everything from every stakeholder sign off, doing things in an agile DevOps way where we're constantly, even going along, constantly getting feedback from them, we found out that there were requirements gaps. And not just requirements gaps, but also getting the right buy-in from those people who were out there actually using the applications to understand what their full roles were, because it's not uniform across all markets.
Mm-hmm. Because the requirements were built by ops or by our peers that have a very local and limited view of the, like for example, if in the future requirements will be built by the PMO organization that hopefully will work closer with the users, will it make things better?
My answer is yes. So I think it's the operations team did work with users. It's just that they came from the perspective of, we understand and we think we have the requirements right, and they had been working on that for some time, but did not go back and solicit all of the users before a decision was made. And part of the problem here is that you don't, because of these transitions across the organization, you don't have clear line of sight of who has responsibility and final say in decision making. Is it operations or solution architect in operations who has final say? Is it the product owners who have final say? Is it me who I'm constantly like, well, what's my requirement? We don't know the requirement. You tell us from the development point of view, what's the requirement? What's the priority? Those types of things are what we in the last state we're trying to get to and narrow down. Who's the final decision maker? When things go across separate systems, who's making that final decision? That all along the way has caused, from my perspective, issues and time delays. You've got to have a clear either product owner, someone in technology, someone who has the final say and says, hey, and gets the buy-in and says, hey, I understand users, you're doing it this way now, but this is the way we've got to do it in the future for the strategic goals of the business. That's not happening, and that's a problem.
That's very interesting things. And also, in a way, it seems to me that you're also partitioned across different areas of the product. Like your team are mostly dealing on that digital IO and the entry part of the pipeline, and operations are more focused on that traffic system and financial. It's just my gut feeling, but is it indeed?
Well, they're focused on it too, because they have to, the support team within operations still has to support digital IO and the users there. So it's there and they focus on it, but they're less focused on the pieces I have to work on from a development perspective, essentially because they're really touching them only from a supports perspective. If something goes wrong with one of these applications, they're sending it to their support. And if their support can't handle it, well, they've got an escalation from an internal development team. They focus on, say, an XGL, which is the center of their system and requires a lot more maintenance, because you need a system, you need the system admins, you need the DB admins, you need your solution architects, all of that to support those larger scale products and processes. And that's also from a historical standpoint what has happened. You know, because I worked first under Monty's team and worked under that technical operations, from a support standpoint, development becomes the escalation because we are now building that product. But all of these other products, since it's by vendors, operations would be, hey, can we figure it out ourselves? If not, we need to go to that vendor.
But take, for example, one of the biggest development work stream, I guess, correct me anytime I'm wrong, please, the financial suite. There are a big chunk of development going there, and the department that leads that effort in terms of requirements, building requirements, following the development, acceptance test, is operations.
That was a split. It was a split initially. So operations did all of the initial layout. Hey, who are we going to use to get the financial suite? We're going to use financial suite. We're going to continue with AP. They laid out and did all of the architectural work with their point of view of the way things should be done. We came in at that point and said, okay, this needs to be done. And we had an architect on our side. He since left the company, but we had an architect on our side who was working with the architect on their side and saying, okay, well, this needs to be done. We need to document this. And where there were gaps in here, there was either collaboration or work from our architect to say, hey, this was a gap that wasn't addressed. Let's go address this gap.
Got it. Interesting thing. I hope to have that conversation with you one day. Like, okay, how are the structure and processes satisfactory? But I want to get to that point in discussion once I understand the system good enough. So maybe I'll focus now more on the so I gain a solid understanding of the system. So in a very broad manner, what e-revisions does the system from user perspective?
From a high level, my understanding is that it's simply trying to understand all of the particular orders in place and get the orders activated. And if there are any change to these particular orders, to process changes to the orders. That's it.
Isn't it what CSSP doing?
It's essentially, from my view, it's just it's from what I work with, it's just another name for saying, hey, we've got output files from Tim that are getting us to activate the order. It is essentially a pass through the CSSP. I've never seen, because this is pretty much handled by operations, I've never seen where they say, hey, there's this extra piece of code or anything that does that. It's more or less my view of e-revision. It's just describing the process of activating the order. We get an output file. We use that output file to do an input to XGL.
Yeah, there is some mix of, I mean, there is some overlapping responsibilities, right, between CSSP and e-revision.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, but I get it. I got it broadly. Cool. Let me. I noted down all my questions here to Gibril. Yeah. Okay, general. What is CSSP? I know. Okay, so the create. So Gio explained to me yesterday that a little bit about in touch, in creative. I got the sense that it is basically what it's doing is storing creative artifacts and also instructions for manipulating and playing those creative artifacts.
That's correct.
What I forgot to ask, is it a third-party product or in-house?
The third party.
Third-party?
Third-party product. This is by Innovar.
Oh, it's by Innovar?
Yes.
And is it also transitioning out, or it's a different
these are the new products coming in, replacing some of the older Innovar products. Like you'll hear probably about bit rate and things like that. BizOps, bit rate. These are coming in to replace those types of products.
Got it. So the older Innovar was handling not only traffic and billing, but also creative assets management.
Yeah, so you'll find on the older diagrams, you'll find up in from the middle part of Novar and up to the right, you'll find where there's stuff around the transcoding. Spot Express is still used, but you'll find like Spot Express, the parts around MMS and all of that. This is what this is essentially coming in to replace. It's coming in to replace those parts where we track those creatives and what is the process to go out and transcode them.
Got it. So it's by Innovar.
Yes.
And other names are bitrate.
Yeah, you may see bitrate on the other diagram.
Bitrate. Cool. Got it. How do you say you got a digital order in DIO with some creatives? How do you interact with this system? Like physically, how do you provide the files to, what is the entry point here? In touch, in some?
So this is part of a new process. Okay. This did not exist before because all of the orders went into TIM. Now, since all of the orders are in digital IO, there's an API that has been created that goes to InTouch. And there's an automated process within DIO now that when the users are taking what is called the QAID or Spot ID that relates to the creative in InTouch, and this is only for videos, it is then taking and calling into InTouch to tell it that, hey, it's been attached to an order and now you need to actually transcode it. And so we get the responses back from that inside of DIO to say that, yes, we've sent in the information to InTouch to go ahead and start the transcoding process.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that the API is only to inform about the existence of the files, but the files are uploaded to S3 or some other repository.
The files are still follow the standard process of Spot Express and eventually getting in here and getting in with Creative and InTouch. They still follow that same standard process. The issue is that from a digital perspective, there is an integration into XGL between the Innovar products, and there is no integration to the digital part of the processing. And so this API was created as part of the digital part of the processing because InTouch will not know to transcode that creative unless it's attached to a campaign and sent in from digital IO. Because the connections are already there in XGL, all of that's understood. So it'll understand that, hey, there's an order here. Here are the instructions to transcode.
Got it. And what is Spot Express? It's a kind of system to exchange files.
It's the system to bring in spots from our third parties, from our clients and agencies.
Got it. So how physically the files are provided to InTouch? Say you got a video. How?
Typically, my understanding, because I don't work with that part, that's really an operations part, but it would typically come in, if you look at the old diagram, from Spot Express, those creatives would flow in. You'll see where they get into get storage on our SAN, and bitrate sees the records there and transcodes them. The same thing happens here. You would still have storage of those things. My understanding is that you still have storage on the SAN when it comes in and flows in from Spot Express. And once they're loaded in from Spot Express and they actually are transferred over to the SAN, InTouch and InCreative would actually see them from there and be able to work the transcoding instructions.
Okay, got it. Are there questions about the creative part here? So no, it's Innovar. If you say that it's more, I mean, mostly the operations deal with that area of the map, right?
Right.
I'll just put a note to ask Monty about the creative suite ops. Cool. Next. High-level question. I understood the team is a Windows-based application, probably old, probably not easy to make changes over there, and yet it's kind of the entry point to all the orders in the system, or in the future some of the orders, not the digital ones. Isn't this a blocker? Like you have a component that it's hard to adjust, sitting on the edge? I don't know.
From my perspective, and I don't work with Tim on a daily basis. I hear these things from users about the things they have to do, or look at where I've had interactions with them from a development standpoint of things I've had to build and needing to get that data from Tim. My view is that the system works. They've made upgrades to it, and it's fine for linear perspective. From a linear perspective, the old world. The new world and the continued move is towards digital. And so at some point in the future, there's a lot of discussion about how we bring in a separate order management system focused on digital. Digital IO may be there for the next year, 2 years, but digital IO, the issue with digital IO, I think the biggest thing about digital IO is not that, structurally it doesn't work, but there's a whole nother set of orders, national orders, that don't go through digital IO. And so there's a separate application that we started building for that.
Why is the separation between national and local orders? I mean, ideally, why do I care if it's local?
Why do you care about that? Because from a user and an information and an order flow standpoint, you should not have to care about it. It should be one order system, and it doesn't care. I put metadata on the orders to say, well, this relates to this client, this relates to this client. It should not matter. But the issue is that from a historical standpoint, linear was the way to go. So that's live TV. So that got stood up as far as a Tim standpoint. Then from a historical perspective, digital started building. And so this system, digital IO, was built to do some things within digital, but still it said, oh, well, we're still going to put it in the linear system. So the linear system was kind of modified to kind of handle that, but it doesn't handle everything. There's then a whole nother separate system of orders from a national perspective, internal national orders, and from this other company called Ampersand, and you can look them up, Ampersand, which is a partnership between several companies so that we do national sales. Those orders come in through a separate process. There is no, from a overall strategic standpoint of a business, you don't want to have multiple systems. You want to simplify as much as possible, have one system. That way you can have everything there and reporting out from one system. We've got all these separate systems, and there really needs to be figured out a way to say, how do we take all of these systems and consolidate on the front end from an order standpoint, so all of the orders are in one system. It's easy to report on because they're in one system. Now, that's kind of the direction where things are going. And so it's like, okay, can we bring in another order management system that then moves us in the direction of digital? And if we get that order system that moves us in the direction of digital, can we include at some point linear orders? And if you can, then that effectively means that we could possibly remove Tim.
Yeah, you said so many strategic things here. I don't know where there are two main interesting insights here. So first, what I heard is that you basically, I mean, digital IO is not here for good. It's not part of the long-term vision. Rather, you're looking for some good order management system. Is this correct?
That's correct. The issue here is there's even a lower issue below that. CMI as an organization is so used to going to a vendor and the vendor giving them something that's almost totally, off the shelf, that they continuously go down that path. There's never a true exploration, and this is why it's growing pains. There's never been a true exploration of, okay, we started building this application. it works. It may have some things that we don't like, deficiencies. How can we expand this and build it out within our timelines to do that? That's never totally explored. It's always looked, the internal applications are always looked almost as POCs. We need to get to market right now. Use this thing, build it for us. Okay, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, when we haven't made a decision about what we really want to buy, now, 4 years, 5 years down the line, after we continuously build on that application, we're going to buy something else. And then that buying something else is expected to replace all of this other stuff.
Yeah.
So, so internal development from my perspective is never looked at as, hey, this is a long-term thing. This is a POC and we're going to buy something later.
Why? And two questions.
Because
why? And would you develop here or buy?
It's a difficult decision, because CMI always looks at other organizations who either partners with them in ampersand, like other MVPDs, other cable video companies like Charter, Comcast. They're always looking at them and what they're doing, and then quite often they try to replicate and do the same thing, even though they're not exactly the same, and they may build things different and they may have to customize different because of where they are. They're always looking at them to make that type of decision. If you build internally, you move ahead to the point where you have something that works for your organization. The issue here, though, underneath all of that, is that because they've been so dependent on vendors and development is new for them, internal development is new for them, there's no true faith, pivot, or understanding of what internal development takes. If you build internally, we'll do it incrementally. But they have this weird expectation. Everything you build is going to be perfect immediately. It's going to have every feature immediately. And it's never the case. And it's the same thing, even if you buy it off the shelf, because so much customization has to go into it. And I came on knowing this, having worked in development for 15, 16, 17 years, and knowing this and tried to explain this to everybody. But from a leadership perspective, they don't get that. They're still at a vendor perspective. And even also, you'll find that because also they even deal with the other parts of the company, CCI, from a vendor perspective, right? They deal with it from a vendor perspective, and they look at CCI as like, hey, CCI, we see you doing something. We want you to build something. Okay, can you build this for us? And so they're dealing with even CCI, another internal part of the company, as a vendor. And for me, what I would do, just looking at all of this, which I haven't totally seen the separate OMS system that they want to build and what it does. I haven't seen all of that feature set. But knowing what I know right now, I would build. You have a foundational system. You just need to add on top of that a few other things, APIs, because digital IO, I'll give you an example. Digital IO originally didn't have Google. We added that in. Didn't originally have Facebook. We added that in. Every time some new vendor, some new product or whatever that you want to do an order against comes, they POC it, and then they say add it to DIO. So that shows that we have a history, even just in the last few years since I've been here, that we can build something where you add in a product and you can do the orders. What we have not been allowed to do, though, because of timing and no clear line, hey, you're the decision maker on this, or you're the decision maker on this. Why are users in 2022 sending PDFs from an application to somebody? Why don't we go build the API to connect to Adobe, Google, Facebook, and whoever else? And so we haven't been allowed to do that from a development perspective. But if I'm doing it and you want to have internal development and look at that as your future to truly have the customized applications that fit in with your processes, then it would be to, hey, we already know we need to rebuild DIO anyway. That's in process, and they're already asking me for that plan. Well, okay, we get parity first, and then we add on the other feature sets. That's where I would go. From my perspective, from a cost perspective, I haven't seen the cost and the long-term support of this other product that's being talked about. But from my perspective, you already have a set of internal developers. Within reason, you're probably almost on parity with if we take a offshore set of developers, continuously build those things, as long as we get good requirements, continuously build them, we could. And so if I was brought on in 2019 to have internal development requested to say, hey, write out a whole DevOps software model, then we've got to, if that's the purpose, then we continuously move in that direction. But if the purpose is from a strategic standpoint, no, we want to continuously focus on vendors, then okay, development is a POC organization to get you there as a bridge to buying the product. But that's what's continuously happened.
Yeah, I mean, while you talk, I feel like I can ask like zillions of questions on what.
Sure.
I don't know where to start. But you know what? Before that, I want to tell you a story, because you said that CCI is a vendor organization. So one of the things that I'm proud of while working with Cox, Cox 2M?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the IoT initiative in Cox. So I started to work with Cox 2M, and it also started as a very vendor-oriented organization. And I was brought to kind of supervise on the vendor's work, because there was one vendor doing everything, like they controlled everything, even part of the IP. And when I started to examine the work, I noted like things that are really problematic. Like they took basic development artifacts like linters and logger, and they wrapped it under their name and their IP. So it's at some point Cox would crazy stuff. Like it's all of this stuff are community standards and tooling. So there's no value in wrapping it on your own package, unless you want to prevent someone else, Cox, from at some point have a smooth development experience. So I noted that, and I will start pushing toward quality and local organization development. And I started to push toward building teams and development culture, but all the executives were very hesitant, because they trusted the vendors. They have a CEO to look into his eyes and ask for developments and deadlines. So it's much easier than taking the responsibility and do it yourself. And then at some point, there was a new big project. This was the decisive point. So there was a new project, and we had to decide how to do it. And then the executives were saying, okay, let's outsource this again to that vendor. And I was kind of, no. This is the point in time where this is our opportunity to start building the confidence. And fast forward, the vendor is gone. They have like 30, 40 developers, everything in-house, and quite good development culture. So
now I'll that's interesting. And I'll tell you, I'll just personally tell you something. So everything with Cox 2M, it was recommended to me. I've just been so swamped into projects that I haven't done it yet. But it was recommended to me internally, hey, set up something with Mark Shorts, because I want you to see how his organization is run, so that we could take the goodness of that and put this in our internal development organization. That's what was suggested to me already.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that it has a good reputation internally. And on top of it, I must say it's not perfect. There are many things to improve, and building a development culture in Cox is not easy. I mean, getting the great developers to an enterprise, you know all the challenges. So
Right.
yeah, but anyway, that's something to discuss probably in another day. So what else I wanted to ask here? Okay, so you mentioned something that one more question on what you said. So basically, I can see how in linear orders, national versus region matters, because for national orders, you need the cooperation of other cable companies, right? I mean, by design, when you start a linear campaign, you need to broadcast with cooperation with other companies, right?
But yes, but understand how that's done. So from the national order perspective, those orders come through a separate conglomerate company called Ampersand. Those orders, they then through a business process solicit with us and say, hey, how many impressions can you provide towards this order? Once that's all worked out, at that point, the order is taken and put in directly into Freewheel MRM. Okay, so that order goes directly in Freewheel MRM. What has happened with that order up to that point? The order is just emails going back and forth. Somewhere stores the details on some network share. There's no way to work against that, report against that, understand what happened. Some adjustment came to the order. It came in an email. So they have this Excel form they send, but there's also email details going back and forth. So there's no full tracking on that order because it's sitting, details sitting on a network share. So there's this whole other process that we started going down of saying, oh, we'll build this application that's going to send the orders into Freewheel MRM directly through APIs. And we're probably we did the initial phase of that application to send to Freewheel MRM. But then that's another order application that we built so that we could get those orders in a system and possibly report on them. But ideally, you eventually have to either at the report layer consolidate, or on the front end for the order systems consolidate, so you can make an easier reporting platform to do the outputs.
Mm-hmm. So if it's just basically emails, how does verification work? Say you just did in some national campaign and Comcast also show the commercial to their customer. There should be a verification back to Nova, right, from all the vendors in order to bill appropriately, correct?
That's right. So the verification. So for those national type campaigns, there's verification that comes back. So what happened in that? This is a whole nother part of digital processing. In that process, the orders go into Freewheel MRM. Out of Freewheel MRM, we've got another application that we built where we turn around and we export out of that what they call an audience exposure report. That audience exposure report is then sent off to a measurement partner who does validation on this. So those validations happen. So the orders come through Ampersand, and at that level, it's worried about, well, hey, this portion of the order went to Comcast, this portion went to Cox or CMI. They worry about that. We only worry about, hey, we got this portion of the order, we run it on our platform, and we output a report and send that over to somebody else to validate it. That's so from our perspective, we don't need to communicate with them. There's already a separate organization at that level that's dealing with that. We only get our portion of the order and process it. So while Roadrunner is focused on linear as well as digital IO, taking up the local digital orders, the national digital orders, which should be in a corollary system, are happening outside of this.
Yeah. So that was my main question. If for digital advertising, national and local is just meaningless, right? I mean, I want to I want to advertise.
It's me. Yeah, it is from that perspective. It is meaningless. It has value only in the fact that for our customers, for our clients, it has meaning because I may get a dealer, auto dealership in Texas that requests, hey, I want to advertise, and they want to advertise to their local customers. But when I get a Ford, that same dealership, Ford, who's this big conglomerate from a national perspective, says, hey, I want to advertise and campaign. They may not come directly to us. They may go through ampersand, and ampersand has the understanding of CMI has this footprint across the whole nation, and they are going to run this ad against all of their customers in the whole nation, targeted based on a specific demographic. So there's in a certain way, from a digital perspective, it doesn't matter. But from another way, from the client perspective, it does, because the client who comes to us is either wants a local order or they want a national order.
Or maybe both.
Or maybe both. Yeah.
Right? So there might be a campaign that involves a digital ad in Google or Instagram or whatever, with some kind of national cable TV campaign.
Yes. Yes.
Got it. So in a way, digital IO cannot be totally detached from the context of linear campaigns.
Exactly. This is why, and when a campaign is made and a client comes to us, the client would have the option of, hey, I want to run this on regular TV, which is, standard TV. I want to run this on, Google, Facebook. And so from that concept, you have to figure out and go through the multiple order systems to make sure that the order flows through the right back-end process.
Okay, that I mean, that's not a simple system, I must say.
No, it's not. When you look at certain blocks, yeah, it becomes simple because it's like, hey, an order is an order is an order is an order. You just need different metadata against it. But then when you get to the back end of where you're actually going to show that ad, yeah, it gets complicated because it can be across multiple vendors or internal.
Got it. We have last few minutes, but you have additional 5 minutes maybe, and if not, it's completely understood you.
Oh no, I do. You're fine.
Oh, that's great. So really last questions for today. Actually, you answered them, most of them implicitly. Okay, so who are your developers? Is it an outsourced company? Do you have tell me about the
for development, we internally right now we have 4 developers. These are our full-time staff. Internally, we have 4 developers. Externally, right now, we track at about 8 developers, which they came on board for the LSA project and came on board and transitioned over to the Roadrunner project. So we have 8 developers. One of them kind of transitions back and forth between doing some parts of QA automation and doing development. Right now, we have 5 QA team members that will go going into next year. We'll probably keep at 5, but traditionally we have 3 QA team members, and they split between first doing the manual testing, but then they switch over as they understand the manual test. They're working to build automated testing.
Sounds great, and a very sincere question. Are you happy with the level of the skills and the skills and the type of developers that you have?
In general, yes, they've done well. The internal developers, I mean, two of them came on in this year. The other two came on in previous years. They do the work. I'm satisfied with them. They're at the top level. The Infosys team, they do well also. For them, because it is a contract team, it is really trying to work with them and making sure that we narrow down our focus, get them right down to a specific task, and get them the domain knowledge that they need in order to build. With that, they do well. There has been no time so far where we were given a specific deadline of saying, hey, we need this by this date, and this is what we want you to build against the requirements, where they have fallen short of building against the requirements. The only place where we have had issues are really the growing pains that we've had in the organization, because we were given a set of requirements by from our teams getting together of what they thought were the requirements and said, hey, build this phase. We built that phase. Then, because there's not a good understanding of, hey, this is development, we're doing something iterative, which we were always asked from the time I come in to do something iterative, that other teams related, because they had the power to do it, turned around and said, oh, this is not what we want, we're not going to use it. We built exactly to the requirements. We went through UAT testing. We went through our QA testing and said, this is what you've asked us to build. You've tested it. You've confirmed it. But then other teams, when the solution architects gathered data, these other teams were not totally in all of the requirements, or there's a second set of requirements that we were asked to build, that those requirements we haven't even gotten to yet. They said, we're not going to use it.
Can you give me an example?
Sure.
Like something tangible that even me,
let me give you a
layman advertising
Sure.
can understand the gap.
Okay, here's the gap. Everybody before I came into the LSA project, they started down the LSA project before I came on board. I came on board. We got to a point, they said, yes, we want to build LSA. Here are all of the requirements. We went through the requirements and they said, well, what's our time frame? We want to deliver to the market at this point. Okay, well, what's the minimum that, because you're giving us this time, what do you want us to build that you can use right now to help in that process? Here's a layout of, here's how long it's going to take with X number of developers. Here's approximately how many sprints, how many hours. Here's the first phase as a foundation you say you want. Here's the second phase you say you want. Here's the third phase you say you want. Well, what do you want? Well, can you build just this phase and this phase? Yeah, okay, so this is the functionality you say you want. They say yes. We go build that. We have the product owner sitting in our daily sprints, looking at everything we build. Every time there's a question, every time there's a demo, we turn around and go to the users. Our QA goes through it. We turn around and go to the users and we say, hey, is this right? Well, we'll make this adjustment, make this adjustment. Now, there's a monitoring piece in there that we said, okay, we're going to build this first level monitoring piece. Operations. Even though we tested with certain users and the same group of users that we tested with, their leaders and them turned around and said, we're not going to use that. Operations, the sysadmins who had to do some monitoring, instead of saying, oh, well, yeah, you built this. This has some of the details of what we want. We understand that you're going to get to the future parts later. They said, we're not going to use this. So then from a leadership...
Who said that they're not going to use it? The users or ops?
Ops said they're not going to use it. The users said they're not going to use it.
But the users were involved. They asked for a few adjustments. You did the adjustment, so... Yes,
the users were involved. Ops was involved in building the requirements, as well as us turning around and later on demoing to them and say, hey, here's where we are. Here's the feature set. Here's how you use it. They turn around and say, no, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, we're not going to use it. So I got that from a development perspective. I got that from both sides, even though they were involved in the requirements and they were involved in the process. And then we got in this huge meeting from the core team, and they turn around, everybody's almost yelling at it. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you have UAT? Why didn't you? I said, well, wait, I didn't say anything because I was really upset in that meeting. I didn't say anything, but other people spoke up. Well, we did have UAT. We did have QA testing. You know, we built the requirements around. So it's not only that from a development standpoint, I can look at and say, this is how things need to be built and work with requirements. I've got these political strategic things happening at that level that handicap the organization and cause confusion.
Yeah, you know, that's crazy. That's crazy story. And actually, I faced it also myself in the past, where it's mostly happened in enterprises. I remember how we went through all the users and it made a huge users understanding process, and then we just thrown away the system because of yeah. But okay, that's crazy story. Can you give me an example? Okay, can you give me an example of what they didn't like? For example, what was their specific claim? Hey, what is
their specific? Okay, I'll go to the view from the users, where they told us, hey, when you put creatives in this system, we usually don't get creatives until later on. So it's okay if you don't build it first. That's what we were told. Our solution architect at that time said, okay, and got buy-in from everybody in the team. Okay, it's not in there, so we won't do that now. Later on, we go to them and they say, well, we won't use it because we have to do entry into two teams. Well, wait a minute. You said you get those creatives later, so you don't mind putting that into two systems. Yeah, but we want to do everything in one system, so we want you to add creatives now and make that a requirement. It's like, okay, you want that as a requirement now? Because you want in every system, even though that comes late, so you can just work from one system, that's fine. We understood that were future set of requirements in a phase 2. But if you want that, we're going to build that. That's the phase 2 stuff you want to build. But you're saying right now you're not going to use the system because of that. From the sysadmin perspective, it was, oh, well, where do you see the error messages for this? Well, the error messages are here. Here are the particular error messages that you have. Here are the filters on screen that you can use for the filters. Well, we don't like the way that you have the filters here. We see this other application and the way this other application worked for linear, and we want you to build it basically to make it look like that. So it's like they're looking at this other linear system, which they never showed to us, never gave us requirements, never told us, hey, make it look like this, but they gave us a set of requirements that got to the basic filtering and everything they needed. But because it didn't look like the other system or be exactly like the other system, nobody told them, well, hey, it provides the basic filter. Switch around now just to go full cycle with that. Some of those same things that they said that they needed as far as requirements and filtering, some of the same things they are accepting now with CCI building the same things in Splunk. Almost the same type of things of giving numbers and things like that and saying, here's where an error message, and here you can filter to the items that failed. Almost the exact same thing, but CCI is doing it from a Splunk perspective. And from if I go to internal conversations of how that happened, we have a leader on the CCI side who's dynamic and spoke and sold them that and said, hey, this is the way to go, and we can do this and we can do this, and they went with it. But when we, as an internal development organization, built our own thing, with similar type filters to try to get there, they'll say, oh, well, you're missing this little data. Can you add this field? We're like, yeah, we can add that field. You're missing it. Can you add that field? Yeah, we can add that field. They're going through the exact same type of process now with CCI, except they're doing it in Splunk and building on the set of tools that they've had for some time. So I'm from a development perspective, I can have a view and say, I'm going to build this and I'm going to build to your requirements, but it's trying to move the organization in a direction where if you want internal development, you need to invest in that and focus on it. And to get through all of these, I mean, just to be frank, I don't like to mince words and I like to be direct. To get through all of these top level political type issues to get an internal CMI development organization to be built out and work with people accepting it and understanding what it takes.
Mm-hmm. That's horror stories from the enterprise. That's, yeah, I mean, you're telling me your crazy stories, frankly. But what bothers me is that in a way, it's a natural evolvement of an application.
Right, it is.
So I would say, okay, so ops are asking for a different way of outputting an error, or the users are doing some flick flag and now asking to do it. I mean, okay, that's anything you said sounds like not doesn't sound like a dramatic change in the system. So
no, it's not. It's not a dramatic change. The only thing that was a dramatic change was what the sysadmins asked for. So we said, hey, if this is how you want things to work, give us a mock-up, which they gave us a mock-up of what they wanted to work. And we said, fine, the underlying data is the same. We can change the UI to look the way you want, and that's fine. But before we got a chance to do it, this is where this other project came in, IPTV, and they said, okay, well, we just transition all of that stuff over there. You know, so I mean,
they gave you a mock for what? For a collaborator system that you need to work against?
Ops gave us a mock-up from an Excel spreadsheet to say, we want the layout for the information to look like this, and we want to be able to do drill downs instead of a flat screen with a table and being able to filter. You know, and so that's what they requested for. They said, we wanted to make more like this. And we said, okay, we can do that. In the middle of all of that, we've had a transition over to, hey, let's take that piece and move it over because we need it for IPTV. We're going to move it over to IPTV and we're going to focus on, we're going to use Splunk dashboards in order to do that. But the Splunk dashboards, for the most part, effectively, textual information, it's the same thing we did. It's, hey, there's a filter, there's a table and a filter.
Yeah, but again, why was it a dead end? I mean,
from my perspective, it's not. It was not a dead end. It's just that this one piece that sysadmins use has to be used within IPTV, because the TV schedules that are the underneath part of all of this, they're used for both the original project that we did with LSA, and they're also the same schedules used in IPTV, because those same schedules all go to FreeWheel MRM. So when IPTV became the priority, it's not that it was a dead end, it's that IPTV became the priority. And so then, instead of putting the faith in your internal development team, it was that the internal development team has made progress and they just need to make some adjustments against these things. It's, oh, we want something larger, go move it over to CCI.
Can you repeat the last sentence?
It said, we want something larger, so we're going to look at moving it over to CCI.
Interesting. Well, okay. I mean, any idea how would you fix this kind of?
From my standpoint, and in our organization, this is a growing pain issue, and it's typically the thing of making small wins against development projects to build faith against the development team building internal things. I don't think it's going to totally change anywhere soon, though, because leadership has a vendor perspective. I can argue for development, and we started going down that path, but I've got a leadership gap right now, right? I'm a manager. I don't have a director above me that they're hiring for. So it's a start over for me. I don't have now my VP who came in with an understanding to some degree of development and agile and said, yeah, I see that future development. We want to move down that path and trying to move that needle. I don't have that. So I'm starting over again in, if you want a modern development organization internally, these are the things you have to do. I'm starting over and having to work as a manager from that type of political view to understand and to try to get everybody to understand. So I'm kind of in a twofold place. I work with the technical stuff and work with the low-level technical team to say, hey, these are the practices we need to improve. This is what we need to improve our sprint cycles, get better with that, put more agile into place. But I also have to work at a political level and strategic to build relationships, get buy-in, build trust against development when, it's like, you brought me on board and you said you wanted a DevOps model. Well, if that's what you want, it's not going to be perfect initially because it's a change, but we've got to go down that path. If that's what you really want as a modern organization, product organization. And so I'm in this strange position where I've got to do both of those.
Yeah, but you were giving the mandate, for example, to develop DIO, which is an important piece in the puzzle.
Yes.
In on-ground development. And don't you feel that this is a start of?
Yes, I do. I do.
Just one more question, a related question, if you can relate to them together. And also, can you now, I highly agree with what you said, small wins. Can you now with the digital IO achieve that small wins? Do you put things in production? Do you get quick feedback from users from production, from real world, or is it kind of a ongoing project that is going to be deployed at some point in the future?
No. DIO, we constantly make improvements and we're constantly working at that. DIO, in fact, we have a deployment today for some things that were asked for changes. With DIO, we get the feedback, right? We get the feedback from users, but there's still some things that we need to change and improve. So DIO, from my perspective, is a win and it helps us to move forward, but it's how do you overcome this is where it's difficult, and I've been doing the work in the background. DIO is a stable application. Since we've taken it over, it's a stable application. We've continuously made
production. Is it in production?
Oh yeah, it's totally in production. It's been in production since
how frequent are you deploying changes?
Historically, we've done it quarterly. We've deployed changes quarterly because typically we're brought a set of changes. We try to work through those changes, and then on a quarterly basis, we would deploy them. So our product owner would come to us and say, hey, I want you to add these features. Within that quarter, we make them, we deploy them. We're doing it a little bit off of that deployment schedule now because we're doing DIO. We're building it and making changes for Roadrunner, but we're also still doing the internal improvements against it. Like, we've got this thing like, hey, we've had a latency issue and we've made some improvements based on that and deployed those. We've gotten feedback from our product owner to tell us, hey, I'm not really hearing them complain about latency on those pages, but we've gone through and we have testing going on and we see that there are a couple of issues that we still need to address. And so that's why I'm like, oh, well, hey, this is an old system. We're still on the old .NET framework. You got to let us rebuild in that regard. We've got to do it. That's our plan. And so it's just to present the plan to them for that and to move forward with it. But there still could be the case that's my technical perspective. There still could be the case where the product owner and from a political point of view, people tell me, no, we don't have the time. We're not going to do that. And from my point, it's like, okay, so you want me to maintain an application that's on an old version of .NET Framework 4 and an Angular, like I think 1.2 or 1.3. You want me to continuously maintain that. And they don't have the technical perspective and understand that. And so I try to explain to them, like, hey, this is an old platform. You're not going to get security updates. You're not going to get this. You're not going to get maintenance updates on those frameworks. And I try to explain that to them and make it clear. But I can still at a strategic political level have people tell me, no, don't do that. Right now I've got buy-in from the product owner. So at least I know as long as I provide the plan, we can move forward with it. But historically, I've had those things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, this is a very, I believe that in almost every organization in the world, there is this struggle between the development. I need to refactor and the business. No way, it's not the right time. But you said something very interesting. You want quick users, you want quick cycles, but you deploy only quarterly. So anything that the developers done in the past months are not being reflected to the users, if I understood correctly.
It is now. This is new. So what has happened, because we have this larger development team now, I've got internal people, and if necessarily the offshore team, to focus on our sprint cycles. And so we've moved. DIO was one of the first projects that we say, hey, we're going to move this into modern development, and we're going to do everything against sprint cycles. And everything for DIO is going to move forward that way. So what we've done probably in the last 3-4 releases in regards to all of the other project work and in regards to DIO, at the end of a sprint, we do a deployment. And so if there any change that happened in DIO within the last sprint, we're ready to deploy it. The only thing that holds us up is our internal team saying, hey, I've made the announcement out to users, and if it's a new feature that they've arranged for the training of that. But what we've started doing now is even to say, hey, we just can't be in that place and we have to deploy. We've started taking DIO and saying, okay, fine, we've got this project Roadrunner that it's competing against, and it's the local changes. We've put in feature flags into DIO now to move forward and say, look, doesn't matter. We can deploy. We'll do our 2-week deployment. When you want us to turn it on, we'll turn it on.
Yeah, I think that's a strategic point, because if you deploy really frequently, I know some of my customers deploying daily, some are multiple times a week, others are once in 2 weeks. But that's almost the solution to many things.
Yes,
Because
it is.
You always get constant feedback from the reality. I think that you get the point, and I should not explain that. Quick feedbacks, both from users and ops perspective, are really. But by the way, there is a very interesting report. Have you ever heard about the state of the DevOps report?
I've heard of it.
Okay, I really recommend you to read it, because it's very high level. It's short. It's being presented by multiple companies, sponsored by Google, based on a lot of data, and really covers strategic insights about software development. They kind of analyze, okay, these are the top performing teams. Okay? They call them the elite teams, based on data. What makes an elite team? They deploy very frequent, and they have a reasonably low rate of defect. And then they analyze, okay, what other characteristics belong to these teams? And one of the very interesting insights is that there were no slow in quality teams and fast and quality teams. If the defect flow was low, the team was also moved in a very fast pace. Traditionally, I believe that, okay, there is a trade-off between speed and quality. If you want to move really fast, you have to acknowledge that you're going to have more defects, which is okay in some companies. Move faster, you have more defects, but it's also good. That was not the case. The team that was moving faster was also producing less defects. Because they build the automation around it, they learned more feedback from production,
Yes.
better mechanism, better CD, better CI. So I think that in a way, moving fast is a cure to many things.
I agree with that. That's one of the big deficiencies that we've always had. We've never had a true internal QA team. And now we have a QA portion of the team. And part of the goal is to build everything out in CI/CD and to have constant automated testing. So we're getting our own internal feedback, but of course we can get the feedback from the users also.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a very fascinating conversation. I can keep it on for 3 hours, really. But you have to do your work, and sorry for taking more from your time. I'm going to watch this conversation recording, by the way, again. Many thanks. Would it be okay if we schedule to next week as well?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Same time?
Same time is fine.
Perfect. Great. By the way, in Israel, we call it a week. We are the only country in the world where the weekend is Friday and Saturday.
Yes. You're about to start the Sabbath, right?
Yeah. So this is the last meeting of my week. I'm going to have dinner.
Okay.
Cool. So also have a great dinner, Gibril, and speak soon.
You too.
Bye.